Good afternoon. Welcome everybody to our webinar today. Really pleased to see you all with us. Super excited to be discussing today's topic of whether dashboards inspire action, and if they don't, how can we get them to do so? I'm joined by an absolutely brilliant panel today, and I can't wait to introduce you to them. Before I dive in, if you can bear with me where I've got just 90 seconds or so of housekeeping to run through before we get into today's topic. I know that webinars won't be anything new to people on this session, but just to make you aware, we are recording. You will have access to the recording after the session. Seen a couple of questions come in on that already. So yes, absolutely. And feel free to share it with your colleagues if you want to as well. We love these to be as engaging as possible, as much as any webinar can be. So let us know where you're dialing in from. I'm in a not so sunny Nottingham today, and I hope it's nicer weather where you are. We will have time for questions in today's session. So anything that resonates or you want to explore more, drop them in, and our experts will take as many questions as we can get through in the session and the time that we've got together. For those of you who are joining a Cynozure webinar for the first time today and don't know who we are, just a little bit of background info on us and why we're qualified to talk about this topic in particular today. We are a data analytics and AI consultancy, and we help organisations to unlock the full potential of their data. So whether that is building a modern data strategy, designing future-proof architecture, or implementing AI, our expert teams ensure that data drives real business value. So if you're looking to turn data into a strategic asset, we're here to help. Our team, who are chomping at the bit to be introduced, and I'll get there in a second, have lots of experience across broad industries and sectors. And you'll see that they're bringing that experience into our conversation today. At Cynozure, we've worked cross-industry. You'll see some references to various different clients and different industry benchmarks in today's session. I will say it's really nice to see a group like the one we've got today, because people, whatever industry you're in, you'll be bringing a different lens and a different flavour. But I'm hoping that you will have as key takeaways a real framework for building effective dashboards that give you clarity on your business problems, but also some advice and practical experience on using dashboards and delivering compelling narratives around them. So that's my 90 seconds over and done. However, I would love to introduce you to our fab panel today. So I'm Sophie Swift, I'm moderating, and I'll be interviewing our brilliant panel. I am joined by Lou Hutchins, Cynozure's Director of Data Culture and Literacy, Dan Wakefield, who is a data analytics and BI consultant who's worked across a broad range of industries and is a real expert in building out dashboards and delivering the narrative and storytelling around it. And then lastly, but not least, we're joined by Alice Holt, who's really skilled in simplistic storytelling that from compelling visuals, animation and infographics. As our head of creative and brand at Cynozure, she's got a real insight into what works, what engages people. So really lucky to have all three of them on the session today. Okay, so as an icebreaker then, and for you to get to know our three panelists, let's start with an icebreaker. We all want to explore how we can move beyond static dashboards and create visuals that drive action. So perhaps I could ask each of our panelists in one sentence, what's the biggest mistake in dashboards that you see today? And if I could maybe start with you, Lou.
Yeah, sure. So from my perspective, it's absolutely not being clear on the issues, challenges that you're trying to solve. And so dashboards having far too much information in them to really drive decisions.
Brilliant. And Dan?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think too many KPIs on one page. I've seen a couple of times recently, and you have to try and talk people down and say, look, that's great. You want to know everything, but what are the actual key things that you really need to know?
Fabulous. And then from a creative and brand perspective, Alice,
I'm going to put my creative hat on, and I will say using too many visual elements as well. It just ends up creating lots of like visual noise. And the real purpose of visualization is insight. It's not just about pictures. So I think that can just be very distracting. So avoid too many visual elements, I'd say.
Amazing, completely agree. Okay, so hopefully we'll be discussing how we can navigate away from that in today's session and start to talk about what makes a dashboard truly impactful. So I think everybody will have seen dashboards that look absolutely stunning, beautiful, a real work of art in data, but don't inspire anyone to take action or do anything differently. So that begs the question, what do you need to do to a dashboard to change it from something that just informs to one that does inspire action? So maybe Dan, could you talk us through some of the key design principles that make dashboards effective?
Yeah, sure. So I've got 5 principles that I tend to follow. The first one's simplicity. So just make it easy to read. Don't have too many visuals. Try and reduce the clutter. Think about data ink ratio, something to Google, Edward Tufte. And the second one is consistency. So helping people, if all the dashboards you build are consistent in terms of color, layout, font, the way you sort things, the type of chart types you use, consistency is really key to build muscle memory with your users, so they know that when they see one of your dashboards, it's going to work the same way and they don't have to put that effort into learning it again. Interactivity is key, so it enables people that are using the dashboard to answer their own questions. It's not just a static view of the data. So have charts that cross-filter each other, drill downs, tooltips, that kind of thing. The fourth one is context. So try and make it self-explanatory. You shouldn't have to explain your dashboard to a user. There should be labels, titles, annotations, legends, so people can see themselves what's actually on there. But you do need to balance that with the simplicity principle. So don't clutter your dashboard with labels and legends if they're obvious. Use them where appropriate. And then finally, the audience. So know your stakeholders. Think about their preferences. Do they like to look at it on a mobile device? Do they like to look at it on a huge 40-inch screen? Think about that when you're building your dashboard, because it does make a difference. And then finally, just across all those, think about or find out about pre-attentive attributes and Gestalt principles. A couple of things again to Google, learn them, they're really useful, but don't stick to them. Audience preference should trump those, but go and have a look at them because they kind of cover the points that I mentioned earlier.
Amazing. I think our brand expert will definitely agree with some of your points there around colour and typography.
For sure.
Alice, if I come to you,
Yeah.
What do you think the principles of branding and design have and can be applied to dashboards?
Yeah, well, lots of what Dan's already said is definitely on the design principle side. I think on branding principles, it should go across everything that you do anyway, not just dashboards, but like use it as your instant sort of visual toolkit because you've got colors and fonts already in the bag, so you don't need to think about it too much. But the idea of brand principles is that it creates a consistent and a visual sort of identity throughout the dashboard. So you're using brand colors, you're using the right types, so it's all cohesive. And it will just maintain this sort of consistent visual hierarchy as well. So branding principles is very much just stick with your brand guidelines, use what you've got already in your toolkit. And design principles are very similar to what Dan's already mentioned. But I think with dashboards, what's key is kind of the user experience, because it is quite an interactive, well, can be quite an interactive thing using a dashboard. So you just want to make sure that you're using very clean and intuitive layouts, so it really enhances usability. And I think don't be afraid of white space as well. I think white space is really important. It just helps your eye guide the page. So yeah, don't be afraid of that. That's minimalist as well. Don't be afraid of it. Choosing the right charts as well, which sort of Dan alluded to, but make sure that bar and column charts are being used to compare categories and line charts are used for trends, that sort of thing. Just make sure the right chart is going with the right data point, because that instantly makes it more intuitive. And then how you can use design principles as well to emphasize key metrics as well. That's a really great way that you can use your brand toolkit. You can use your key colors as your way to emphasize these key metrics. And again, I would emphasize the interactive element that Dan mentioned as well, like, because that's something that's quite unique to dashboards in the design world, because a lot of stuff in design world is, is flat. So having something that can be interactive is great. So make, use of filters and things like that. So it gives that more custom experience for the user. So yeah, so lots of what Dan said for sure. But then I think just always think about the user experience. That's really key when it comes to dashboards.
Amazing. Thank you. I love that. And I
That's okay.
imagine that if you're an exec looking at a dashboard and the brand, the brand is there, the colorways are there, it's already going to feel like this is us. This is our
Yes,
information.
exactly.
So that's amazing. Lou, as Director of Data Culture and Literacy, I'm sure you'll agree that a really important part of this is having a culture where people will act on the data that they see. So how do you embed that culture across an organization?
Great question. I think it actually starts with, in order for a dashboard to be truly impactful, you have to really align on what is somebody going to do differently with that information. And I've spent many years in the retail sector, and for a period of time oversaw 12 contact centres. And you can imagine on a Monday morning the sheer amount of reporting we would do for trade. But what became really apparent to me when I took over the responsibility of that part of the organisation was that we were spinning out all of these reports, but I wasn't really clear about the why. And was anyone at a board level actually making different decisions out of the back of that information? So first and foremost, when you're thinking culturally about a dashboard really driving an impactful experience, think about how often your audience needs it, who needs it, and when and how often they need that information. And then challenge that stakeholder to ensure they're going to do something different with the information. Because I would say that still in industry, there are far too many reports that are just for report's sake. And actually what we did in my day of running these contact centres was I actually started to send a red receipt with them to see who was actually opening them. And very quickly, within about 2 to 3 weeks, it became abundantly apparent that we could reduce the amount of reporting by about 65%. So I think for me, culturally, it's about ensuring that you're really going to drive a change in the organisation with the dashboard, and it actually solves the business problem. And if it doesn't, seriously question why you're creating it in the first place.
So I imagine then that knowing that people actually use and interact with them is a hallmark of a dashboard being used well. Are there any other hallmarks of dashboards being used well?
Yeah, I think, if you can start to see that due to the information, different business to strategic decisions are being made, then that's a really, really good sense that your dashboard is having an impact. If you can start to show incrementally improvements in the business, whether it's cost efficiencies, whether it's better product buying, whether it's better customer experience, and you believe that the report is driving different action, then I think that's a really good sign that your dashboard is impactful. If it's just there and it's just slotted into the folder of all the other reports, but nobody's really talking about it or doing anything differently with it, then I think you have to question the value add it has.
Amazing, thank you. And then if I just come back to you, Dan, before we move on to our next topic, because I'm hearing that clarity and as much simplicity as possible are important, but I know that you'll have seen as an expert in building dashboards in Power BI and Tableau that there is so much you can do with those tools. So how do you make this balance between giving people the clarity that they need and the complexity that of the features that those tools offer?
Yeah, I think try not to get carried away with what the tool can do. Don't worry about that. They're both tools are capable of really complex analysis, but you won't need it all. In fact, in most cases, you'll need 10% of what it can do. So get a fundamental understanding, learn how to build a bar chart and a line chart and that kind of thing, and then focus on your users. And what you'll find is that you'll learn what you need to know when you need to know it. So if you suddenly come across a use case for a Sankey diagram, then you'll go and Google it and figure out how to build a Sankey diagram. You don't need to learn all of that stuff at the beginning. You just need the fundamentals and then focus on what your users want and how you can add value to their area of the business. And the clarity comes from delivering exactly what your user needs and no more. So don't try and embellish it with stuff you think, oh, but they might want to see this and they might want to see that. Just give them exactly what they need. And actually figuring out exactly what they need is probably one of the biggest challenges, because a lot of the time they won't even know. So you have to spend time together, iterating, going through, building it together potentially, so that you do give them and you help them understand what they need, and then you build exactly that.
Brilliant. That's really helpful. Thank you. And a brilliant segue into our next topic. So thank you for teeing me up there around the art of storytelling and helping people to see what story they want told, what answers they want answering. I think what I'm hearing here is great dashboards aren't just presenting data, they are telling a story, but that isn't always intuitive for people reading them or for people building them. So perhaps maybe if we start with you, Alice, how would you go about simplifying complex messages into visual stories?
Yeah, it's a great question. When I was at uni, we had this book that I think it's Stephen Covey, but someone or can correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, but the book is Begin with the End in Mind. And I always thought that was a great way to approach design and generally, well, any kind of like narrative and design is begin with the end in mind. So you want to kind of identify what the core message is, because that's what ultimately people want. They want the core message. So you could design something and spend hours on it, but if there's no core message there, it's kind of useless. So what is the key takeaway? What are the key insights? And then what do you want the audience to focus on when they're looking at that dashboard or whatever design you do? But if it's a dashboard, what do you want them to quickly take away from that dashboard? So, and you can do this by using, a clear visual hierarchy, which you can use your brand elements for that. Just logically order things. It might not sound like a sort of storytelling technique, but it actually really does create a story just by using a clear hierarchy. Like I mentioned before, choosing the right data charts as well, really important, because just naturally, if you have a data chart that is worked in the right way, it just is easier to register. Minimalizing clutter, definitely. If there's detail you don't need, just remove it. You could always add it in a footnote or an appendix or something like that. And then I think my key thing is to kind of guide the viewer as if you were just telling a story. Like, how is a story written? It's structured with a narrative. It's structured with an introduction, insights, and the conclusion. You can structure anything that you design in that kind of way. And that's how I approach anything that I do. If it's a dashboard, if it's a video, if it's an infographic, I will literally get pen to paper or pencil to paper usually, and I will draw it out. And that helps the creative juices flow as well. And I think it's good to get away from the screen for a little while. And it just kind of makes you think a little bit differently and build it more as an intuitive story rather than trying to throw everything on the screen and show everything. So that would be my big thing. It kind of links you back to that core message as well when you're kind of like storyboarding it just on paper. So
I really love that. I can think of a few data professionals and even some colleagues who would draw things out on the back of an envelope, perhaps first.
And you don't have to be, it doesn't have to be creative. You don't have to be great at drawing. It's just, I think it just helps to move away from the screen and just literally storyboard something out. And it doesn't, video usually links to storyboarding, but you can storyboard anything. It doesn't need to be a video. It can be a dashboard as well.
I love that. I mean, you've talked about the visuals there and the design, but I guess storytelling is so it's at the heart of marketing, isn't it? Is there anything that you think data professionals can learn from marketing?
I think, I think we can learn from one another, definitely. But I think it really is about that, how to transform raw data into a compelling story is kind of the key thing where we sort of interlink, because that's ultimately what brand and marketing is all about. It's kind of telling stories. That's kind of what we do all the time, and try and emphasize key insights. So we can help, one another by enhancing data understanding, which is really, really key, isn't it? Help reveal key insights, but then also support better communication of how we support those key insights as well, because having the key insights is great, but then what do you do with them? And that's something that marketing can help a lot, for sure. Like, how can you explain what these insights actually mean? And then that will therefore drive action, because that's the goal. You want to you want something to happen after you've got these insights. It's great having all this knowledge, but what do you then do with it? And I think that's something that marketing is really great at doing, and designers obviously will help in making things look great in the process as well. So I think there's lots that we can learn from one another for sure, but I do think that's sort of how you transform the raw data into a story is where we can help one another really well.
Brilliant. And there's definitely a call to action in some of this data that's being shown. Completely agree. Brilliant. So Lou, perhaps a trickier question then, because obviously we want everybody to be using these dashboards, but not everybody has the same level of confidence in data or data literacy. So how can you ensure that your dashboard will speak to multiple audiences?
Yeah, great question. And I think probably the first thing is not one size fits all. So really understanding your stakeholders and what they need the story to tell, to drive. What's the action that they're seeking? What's the change that they want? What's the influencing moment maybe within their storytell? And how is that dashboard going to help them? I think a large part of effective storytelling and getting dashboards used is about relationship management. And I think it's all about how you build relationships across the business, how you tailor the messages so that they feel relevant and they resonate with your stakeholders in a way that really helps them to solve their business problems. So not the data story you want to tell, but what's right for them, what's going to help them and unlock the right level of debate and the right level of influence. And I think you're absolutely right. One of the things that we come into time and time again is actually just getting the basic confidence level up in an organization to be able to use dashboards. And even one step before that, aligning on the definitions of what some of these data attributes actually mean. So when we say customer, how are we defining a customer in our organization? Are we all aligned on that definition? And sometimes the answer is no. So a lot of this is actually about taking a step back, having the right level of conversation. I think Dan alluded to it at the start. It's really sitting down and really gathering the information of what is the change somebody's seeking to make. What's the impact that they need to have and with who, and making sure that we're structuring that storytelling and the data points in a way that really resonates with the business problem in a way that influences in a simple way. And that might be different if you're in a marketing function trying to drive better customer segmentation and driving customer lifetime value, to you being in supply chain and you wanting to drive cost efficiencies. You might be using similar data points, but you might want a very different outcome. So really spending time with your stakeholders to really get to the nub of the issue. And I think one of the things I've learned from spending so much time with Dan on these types of projects is it's the simplicity. It's when we overcomplicate or when we don't describe or we don't define what we mean by a data point as well, that's where confusion happens. So the simpler the story, and I don't think there needs to be grandiose, complex messaging in data. Sometimes it is, what is the simple story that's going to drive an influence? Making sure that we just don't assume that everybody is comfortable. So I think when we think about those filters and those drop downs and those definitions, that's such a key part of building confidence and taking people on the journey. But I would say it's probably not a one size fits all. So it starts with that relationship building and knowing the problem you're trying to solve.
Amazing. So there's a bit of communication before and after, I guess, that you've got the dashboard.
And through, and it's probably ever evolving. As you move forward, you might tweak, you might adapt, you might change. And the wonderful thing about data points is they don't have to remain static. You can iterate, you can evolve. So yeah, definitely.
Amazing. Okay, brilliant. And then Dan, if I can come to you, because you must have so many examples where you've had to tell a story and engage stakeholders, provide dashboards for them and then take them through it. Have you got any examples, and where I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, any examples where you can see that the storytelling really brought the dashboard to life for the stakeholders?
Yeah, definitely. There's one that springs to mind where the story kind of evolved over time. So we were asked by the product team, this was when I worked at a well-known pizza company, we were asked by the product team in marketing to try and help them decide which products to drop from the menu. So they'd realised the menu was too busy and it was confusing customers, so they wanted to drop some products. So we built a dashboard that basically helped them identify which products to drop, and that was by having a scatter plot. So we had the mix of the products, so what percentage of orders contains that product, and we plotted that against the average basket value, so we could see, based on where the dot was, is it selling well and does it make us lots of money when it does sell. And that worked, and we identified some products that we should drop. But what we also found that was interesting was the vegan products had a really low mix, which you'd kind of expect, but they had a really high basket value. And we couldn't understand why these vegan orders were so profitable, why the sales were so high on each individual order. So we added to the dashboard some basket analysis that said, when you click on one of these dots, it then shows you the breakdown of what's in that order, what's in that basket. And what we found was that the vegan orders were containing pepperoni passions, meat feasts, chicken wings, and we were like, why are these vegan orders containing all this meat stuff? And what we realised was it was what we coined as the vegan veto. So you've got a group of people having a party, and you're trying to decide, where do we get our takeout from? And if your pizza company doesn't sell vegan, then the vegan people in the room will say, let's go elsewhere because we won't have anything to eat. So it told that story that that situation is going on, and that wasn't really understood prior to building that dashboard.
I love that, because it's a real example of like how you can drive a better customer experience, but also like a better value add for the company, like revenue increase as well. So becomes an easier conversation when you're saying, hey, I found a way for us to make more money and to make our customers even happier. It's much easier to engage in that conversation.
Win-win.
Yeah, exactly. Love
it
that.
helped the marketing team as well, because then they could go out and market that and say, oh, you're having a party, you've got vegans, why not order our pizza? So it helped with that.
I imagine you had lots of departments knocking on your door for dashboards after that.
yeah, we're always were anyway.
Okay, amazing. So on the technical side of building those dashboards, is there anything around the interactivity and animations or other parts of tools like Tableau and Power BI that really help with the storytelling that you'd recommend?
Yeah, I think the animation is a funny one, because I think that's one that BI tool vendors have added as kind of a shiny thing to attract people, and I think animation rarely helps. The only time I've seen that work is, again, when you've got a scatter plot and then you want to show that changing over time. So you animate and the little dots move around, and you can follow a dot and see what's happened to it over time. But interactivity is vital. I think it's that idea of, people talk about self-service and things like that, but it's people being able to answer further questions. So if they can filter, an example I had, again, working at the pizza place, was there was a Monday sales meeting, and loads of people would all get together into a room and talk about sales, and there was a dashboard they went through. And the problem was that when a question cropped up, that was then given to an analyst to go away and answer and report back next Monday. Whereas if you've got a live dashboard that you can interact with and drill down and so on, you can answer your own questions there and then in the meeting. So you've not lost a week then waiting for someone to go away and answer that question.
Yeah, and I guess coming back to your area of expertise, Lou, that creates a virtuous cycle of people being able to access the insights they need for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's such a key thing, is that accessibility to be able to help yourselves and giving people the time and the training. I noted somebody had kind of talked in the chat about everyone wanting things in Excel. And we're definitely still in a world where people are going to want things in Excel. But actually, part of that is that we haven't necessarily taken people on the confidence journey with using the tool that the business is using, whether that's Power BI or Tableau, making sure that people really understand the art of the possible so they can self-serve. And also, sometimes it's the simplicity of just having enough licenses to be able to access that information in the reporting tool of choice. So Yeah, accessibility is key, and taking people on the journey and giving them the confidence to use these things also. But Dan, I think what you're laddering up to as well is again, even when it's got the shiny things like animation, it's just where relevant, yes, but keep it simple.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so Dan's given us some really good examples there of where dashboards have progressed and improved, and it's generated more stakeholder engagement and conversation. So I'll move us on to the next part, which again, Dan is teeing me up perfectly between these sections. So how can we overcome the real world challenges? What are some real world practical takeaways that we can share with our audience listening today? And perhaps if I come back to you, Alice, is there anything that you've seen in a dashboard that you thought that just didn't work for me, or a change that you've made that
Yeah.
you can talk about?
I think when it's a really common pitfall for sure is just being cluttered and very overwhelming, because there's no way of getting a story when you've got just all this cluttered information. So for me, that's a really big thing, just being very, very cluttered. And I think there are lots of little simple like changes that you can make, especially from a sort of design perspective, um, to a dashboard or any sort of data chart. Just like as simple as just reordering the data, so the key patterns can appear, so it sounds very, very simple, but it can make a huge difference, like putting the highest percentage at the top and then lowest at the bottom, but it's not always done. And just things like that visually just make it so much easier to pick up what's the most important aspect of that particular question. And then also like with color as well, like use really contrasting colors as well. So if you're comparing like two or more metrics, make sure that you've got contrasting colors, because that will really help the viewer see there's a clear differentiation between those things. And I've seen lots of dashboards where the colors are all sort of just mucky and all the same sort of colors. And then especially when you've got things like pie charts and things like that, it just becomes impossible to like actually understand what is going on. So color is just a huge aspect of, data charting. But yeah, I think that there are lots of little simple tricks that you can do for sure. And they don't sound that like dynamic, but it just can make a huge difference. So yeah, just reordering data or changing the colors to be really contrasting can be a huge impact.
I can completely relate to the colour one. I've got a dashboard that I use every day, and the colours change almost every night. We've just not got to the heart of it yet. So you think you're seeing one thing and you're actually seeing something completely different. So 100%.
Yep.
Okay, so Lou, you talked earlier about having a read receipt to make sure people actually were engaging it. And I bet that, that resulted in more conversation and engagement with stakeholders again. Having, figured out that you could reduce the reports you sent out by 60%, was there anything that you did within the reports you kept to improve that stakeholder data conversation?
Yeah, I think this goes back to being really clear with your stakeholders on the problems they're trying to solve. And I spend a lot of time with colleagues in lots of different industries talking about how do we ask the right questions of our data in the first place. And if I think back to when I was a young sprightly thing at M&S, and I would go to the insight team and say, can you pull me together a report and I want this data in it and this is the answer? And they go, hang on a minute, Lou, what's the problem you're trying to solve? Let me identify what the right methodology and what the right data points are. And sometimes it is about taking people back a step to really think about what it is that they're trying to do. And I think that whether it was in the experience of contact center management and trying to simplify the story, one of the things I think we need to get better at doing when we're thinking about building that dashboard in the first place is getting really clear with the owner of that information about the part that they're going to play once you produce it. And I think that this works regardless of level in an organization as well, so that when someone comes to you and says, I need this bit of information, just build me a report, off you go, that you don't just then squirrel away and build the report, but you start having a conversation about, as a board member, what's the action you're going to take out of this information? What's the problem you're trying to solve? And what do you believe the benefit of having that data will be? to solving your problem. And if we can have that kind of conversation across the organisation, we start to challenge the end user about the role they play in taking that report on in the first place. And I think it absolutely goes back to having conversations, building relationships, understanding the business problem someone's trying to solve. But I think actually it probably takes us challenging the individual stakeholder on asking the right questions of data in the first place, and also guiding them through that, because not everybody knows the answer. We don't know what we don't know, and that's almost how we get to this point of having just reams of data points, because nobody's really quite clear on what data they need to solve a problem. So they're like, I'll just have all the data. What we need to do is help guide in the right way to say, actually, what's the problem you're trying to solve? And let me identify the right data points for you. So it's all about that conversation. It's all about building relationships. It's about challenging when it's right. And it's about guiding people and giving them the confidence, I think. And making sure it really is adding tangible value. And if it isn't, challenging that as well and saying, you know, we've been producing this report for the last 4 months. What have we done differently off the back of it? And if nobody can give you a clear answer, then you have to go back to what is the point of this information? So, yeah. Challenging and guiding, I think, is my view on it. But yes.
I love that. Thank you so much. I think, Dan, you've got an actual example that you're happy to share with us on this call.
Yeah, I've mocked something up, so it's dummy data, so it's not sensitive or anything, but yeah, I can show it.
Brilliant. So what I will do, and this is the clunkiest part of the webinar, but I'm going to stop sharing my slides so that Dan can share his. Just while you load that up, Dan, I'm really conscious, there you go, I've stopped sharing so that you can share your screen. There's one question that's come in, and I think this might be one for you, Lou, around what do you do when the exec sponsor just doesn't want to engage in a conversation?
That's really difficult, because I almost feel they don't have the right to opt out of that conversation. So maybe with a bit more tenacity, being a bit pushy about that, because I think the other thing you could do is start to talk about the cost of time and energy of pulling that information together, and that actually you really need to know what the value add is going to be to the organisation. Because if there's one thing exec members care about is its costs, it's about revenue driving activity. So it might be about the language, but I think actually being able to have a really honest conversation about, in order to get you the best information so you can make the best decision, I need a bit more from you first about what it is you're trying to solve for. Rather than just giving you a data point. And so it's probably flipping the conversation. And actually, to be honest, this is where we spend quite a lot of time with organisations now, having the conversation with the exec to talk about their role, their responsibility, and the part that they play. And it's also about their behaviours. And so actually, it's no longer just acceptable to just ask for a data point because you want it. Actually, you have to be able to stand by your bed and say why. So it very much depends on the organisation. But if you need any support offline on that, I'm very happy to have an offline chat, because I think actually taking our exec through the experience of change is key. And how we do that in the right way really unlocks the value of that data mindset transformation that's needed. Dan, take it away with your magic.
Okie dokie. I want to answer that Excel question at some point as well, because I've got some experience of that.
So make sure we come back to that, Dan.
Come back to it.
So before everyone jumps on me, this is the bad example, and it's intentionally bad. Okay, I don't think anyone would actually ever build a dashboard this bad, but it's intentionally bad because I wanted to talk through a couple of points. Let me just bring my points over here so I can see. So what we've got here with this bad example is, first of all, a bad choice of visualization. So we can see that, you know, we've got this KPI tree thing here that looks quite cool, but isn't really telling us much. We've got a map, which people love to put on dashboards just because they think it looks cool. We've got an image on the back of a chart. I can't think of any time when it's a good idea to put an image on the background of a chart. It just distracts from the data points. We've got pie charts, which everyone hates on. I think they're fine if you've got two segments and you're showing proportionality, but generally steer away. We've had a nod towards branding. So this is a logo that I generated with Copilot. This is what Copilot thinks global sales looks like. So the logo has just been kind of dumped on there without any further thought. And then we've got some metrics down here on the bottom left. So generally chaotic, not easy to read, and bad choice of visualization. And then the interactivity is just default. So we can see if I click on the pie chart, it kind of shows the brushing, proportional brushing here on that, which may be fine, but it may not be. In a lot of cases, you want it to actually filter the chart rather than highlight the elements within it. So if we move on to the good example, so I've basically simplified it. So we've only got line charts and bar charts on here, and thinking about the layout. So people in the Western world tend to read dashboards in a Z pattern. So they'll start in the top left, they'll work across, go down and work across again. So put your most important metrics or the things you want them to see first in the top left corner. We've got color here, so we can see, good use of color. Generally, everything is in the brand color, but the bad stuff is highlighted in red. So you can immediately see, in general, there's a problem with cost. But again, we've used the interactivity. So if we look at Indonesia, which is our highest profit geographical area, we can see actually it's fine. And that's probably why they've managed to keep their costs low and their sales high, so their profits sky high. If we come and look down the bottom, we can see, sales is down, and that's the problem. Cost actually isn't the problem for this particular area. So that kind of gives the nod to the point about being able to answer questions by drilling down. I've removed a lot of clutter. So if you look at the bad example, we've got on the x-axis here, we've got the year, the month, we've got the word month. Now, everyone knows these are months, so you don't need to put the axis title of month. We've got duplication here because we're saying it's the sum of quantity by year and month. And then again, we're saying here, sum of quantity. So you don't need to keep repeating yourself. So try and reduce that clutter. I've probably gone a little bit too far, to be honest, here, because you might look at that and say, actually, I don't know what I'm looking at. But in this case, it's driven by the filter at the top. What else did I say? So the interactivity and the colors and the clean background. Yeah, so getting rid of the images in the background, and just, grid lines can be useful. Think about whether you want to have a y-axis and grid lines, or whether you want actual data labels on here highlighting what the number is. In this case, on the bar charts, I've used data labels and I've got rid of all the axes. And in the line chart, I've left the axes on and I haven't got data labels. Again, it's going to depend on your individual use case, but the idea is to try and reduce that redundancy. Don't say the same thing in lots of different ways. Really, and I think that was all the, the branding point. So again, rather than just dumping the logo on, I've taken the color from that logo and applied it throughout. So it, like we said earlier, it feels like that company's report. And we haven't just dumped the logo on, we've put a nice bar across the top, and that gives us somewhere to put our filters. So that consistency point I mentioned earlier, if you were working for this company, you might want to always have that blue band across the top and always have your filters in the top right corner. So whenever your users come and use one of your reports, they know straight away how to use it. They're not having to relearn it again.
It's really good. It really feels like it's part of this company, doesn't it? I think it's really good. And I suspect this is head of creative and brand approved, Alice.
Yes, very much so. It's a great use of white space as well, which I was saying before. Yeah. Like, it's so much clearer, and that's the ultimately what you need to go for, right? You need it to be clear and obvious. And I think the use of color is great in the, like, you know, showing this is bad, because for most people red does mean bad. So it's just really a simple trick, but it just is so effective. You instantly get what that means. And just little things like having borders around all the elements just to give it an actual structure. I think it's great. It's far superior.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us, Dan. It's always really good to see a real life example. Okay, I'm going to take control back of the screen. It's the second clunky bit of the session. But one of the things that really jumped out at me, Lou and Alice, in that is that data visualization is becoming such an important skill, no matter what profession you're in, as is interpretation of that. Like, how do you have how do you use that in your day-to-day job, and what advice would you have for anyone who doesn't feel like they're quite there with their skill level yet? If you could answer that, and I'll get the slides back on. Thank you.
Should I go
first, please?
Yeah. So I think, I mean, there's so many different like elements, but I think you kind of want to focus on clarity for sure, because I think that is what makes sure that your story is clear and that the data points are clear. So you want to ensure that the data is always presented in concise and intuitive ways, because that's how you get action from your data as well. And I'd also say that, like Dan just showed with his dashboard, a really clear visual hierarchy is so important, so important. And that can just be through using the branding, right? You know, using the right brand and colors. But it just, by having a clear hierarchy, you instantly make the important insights stand out. And you can do that, like I said, through using your branding, through using layout, through using the right typography, using the right color. Use what you've already got, because most people will have some kind of brand guideline, hopefully, that they can follow when working for a company, and just use what you've got there to create this visual hierarchy, because just by doing that instantly makes things much more digestible for any user, whether they're really data illiterate or whether they're like super, data champion. Like, it will just make it much easier for any user to get that story across.
Amazing. And I mean, you must come across this in your day-to-day role, Lou, helping people who aren't data folk to really get hands-on with the data.
Yeah, and in fact, I think that's probably where we spend more time, is really helping organisations across teams get more confident with the use of data. And I think that starts with having a board that really understand that data is a key enabler to their business strategy, and then making sure there's the right level of investment to upskill people where necessary. And that also blends into everything that we do when we're recruiting somebody new into an organisation. Are we checking their data literacy? Are we understanding if they have data capabilities there? All the way through to the way in which an organisation makes decisions. And if they are far more gut-led than data-led, how do we take them on that journey? We spend a lot of time with organisations working through what's the art of the possible and how do you build that confidence level across an organisation without just assuming that everybody knows that they should be doing it, and really setting out the stall of how you do that. And I think that really comes through the right level of investment in teams, giving them the right confidence in the tools, whether that's Power BI, Tableau, or indeed even Excel, which we know businesses are still using in day-to-day. And in some cases, that might be the right answer. But making sure that we are not just assuming that people know how to read a dashboard. And I think it goes back to, this is where the beauty of dashboarding today allows you to talk about how a data point has been built, where it's come from, what's the assumption, getting everyone to align on those data definitions before you're even putting pen to paper. So yeah, and I think that probably organisations need to ensure they're carving out enough investment time in helping people upskill to be successful in today's world.
Amazing. I love that. Thank you. Really, really insightful. And I'm very conscious that we're 10 minutes away from the top of the hour, which is the full time that we've got today. And I want to make sure that we've got time to answer everybody's question. I've noted a couple more that have come in, acknowledge them, we'll have time to ask them. If you do have any questions, now is your chance to pop them into the Q&A or the chat box. We'll get through as many as we can. Whilst you do that, and I'll give you a minute or so to put questions in, I really wanted to talk you through some of the ways that Cynozure can help. And obviously you've heard from our experts today in this space. Some of the services that we offer around dashboarding are in this data storytelling piece. So offering workshops, upskilling courses for teams to really be able to tell that story and tell it confidently. We can help you build interactive dashboard platforms that work and do that exec engagement that Lou and Alice and Dan have talked about today. Our third offering around this is automated data story generators. So an add-on that will help you to tell the story powered by AI. And we also do have some data viz templates and libraries that you can use as well. If you're thinking that you need some support in this space or with your exec stakeholder engagement or with your upskilling or anything else and it's not listed here, I'd recommend you do still get in touch. We offer a broad range of services for our clients and we would love to hear about your specific challenges and whether we can help.
And if you're lucky enough, you might get Dan as well working on your project for you.
Amazing. Amazing. Brilliant. So we are at the Ask Me Anything portion, which is usually the side where panelists get a little bit more nervous, but we've answered some already in the time today. I really want to come back to the Excel one, Dan. Like, what do you do when people just live and breathe Excel?
Yeah, I would say stop fighting it, was what I learned, because I was in the same place and I was getting really frustrated. And what I realized was actually they're going to do it anyway. And so if you want to get people on side, you need to meet them where they're at. And if they're in Excel and that's where they're comfortable, then go there. And if you're using Power BI, especially a Microsoft product, that is really easy to do because you can build your Power BI data models, you can have your reports pointing at those data models, but then you can also give people that direct access through Excel. So you can teach them how to use pivot tables if they don't already and get them querying the data themselves. So you're still governing the data, you're still defining the metric definitions, all of that kind of stuff is under your control, but you're just saying to them, use Power BI if you want, or use Excel if you want, whichever you're most comfortable with, and you'll get the same answer because it's coming from the same data model. So I think the people with Power BI are lucky on that front because you can have best of both worlds. But you do need to put governance in place around it because I had a similar thing back in the day of analysis services cubes where I built cubes and then I taught people how to build Excel reports off the back of those cubes and they went away and went mad. And before I knew it, there were 200 spreadsheets with all their reports and then people were refreshing them every week. You don't want that, believe me, because then you have to go away and try and automate all those Excel reports. So you've got to agree some governance up front with the users and say, yes, you can use Excel, but if you build something and you find it useful, send it to me and I'll automate it for you and I'll turn it into a Power BI dashboard. And don't, get this kind of industry of refreshing your own Excel-based reports. So I think embrace it, but govern it and build a trust, like you said, Lou, with and a relationship with your users, whereby they don't feel like they're having to run off and do shadow BI. Just work with them and figure out ways of letting them use Excel in a safe way.
I love that because it sounds like it's almost like a gateway in. It's the stepping stone to getting them to engage with some of these tools. And I wonder if you've seen that, Lou, in the culture and literacy space.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so many of the organisations we go into are in a hybrid space. And in fact, I've been in organisations that have used Excel, Tableau and Power BI. Nobody's really sure what the tool of choice should be. And actually, it's as long as you're making decisions off the back of data and you've aligned on the data definitions, don't get too hung up on the tool. But what I would say as well is make sure that we understand the why behind people not using tools. And it might just be that they haven't got the confidence or they haven't had the right level of investment or training to be able to use it effectively. So revert to type. And people typically struggle with change. So when you've got something new in, it is very natural to go, yeah, but that's not for me. I'll just do it the way I've always done it. So it's giving people a compelling reason as to why it might be better to switch as well. And if there isn't one, Let them play where they want to play.
Absolutely. That's perfect. There is a really interesting question in our Q&A box around this person's data is mainly qualitative, yes or no. Do you have any suggestions on the best ways to present that kind of data to an audience?
I think that's when I'd go for a pie chart. Because it's a binary thing, you know, it would be really clear then what percentage or what proportion is yes or no. So I think it's a great use case for pie charts.
Yeah, and bar charts as well, because again, that's just a comparison, isn't it? But yeah, definitely pie charts or donut charts. You could use icons as well. Get some icons in there. That's where you can be a little bit more, potentially a bit more creative with things like that as well. But yeah, definitely pie charts. Good example there. When to use them.
It's fantastic. Thank you. So I think we've got through the majority of questions. If you have popped one in and I've missed it, we'll come back to you one-to-one after today's session, but we are coming to the end of our time together. It's gone really fast, as they always do. Perhaps if we leave with one takeaway, perhaps if I ask all of our panelists, what's one takeaway in one sentence that you would love to impress on the audience today? I'll come to you, Alice, first.
Oh, I think I've banged on about it quite a lot, but it's about hierarchy, definitely. I think that instantly helps tell a story. So whether it's how you create your hierarchy, whether you use it in a sort of visual way and how you lay things out and using your branding, but I do think a really clear hierarchy instantly tells a story with your data. So yes, that would be mine. One top tip for sure.
Thank you. And you, Dan?
I'd say stakeholder collaboration, to talk to your users, understand their data literacy, understand their area of the business, work with them. Don't just go away and build a dashboard and bring it back to them later. It's an iterative process.
Thank you. And Lou?
I think it's a build on Dan's, but it's get clear on the business problems you're solving with the dashboard in the first place so that you can really ensure that the data points help solve for it. And that is all about knowing your stakeholders and building that relationship.
Love it. Thank you. So, end of our session today. I just want to say a massive thank you to our three amazing panelists, Lou, Alice and Dan, for sharing their insight and experience with us. We're super grateful. Big thank you to all of our audience who have engaged and contributed. One of the things I love about the data community is people are willing to share, and I can see some amazing book recommendations in the chat. So check those out if you want to have a look. You'd be very, very connect with each other and look at each other's recommendations there. As I said at the beginning, this will be available as a recording to you. So once that's processed, you'll be able to download it and watch it back. If you think you have colleagues that would benefit from watching this, by all means, share it with them. And if you would also like to take advantage of a one-to-one call to talk about any specific challenges that you have in your organisation on this topic, we're all ears. Feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn, or you can find us at cynozure.com. But that's it for today. Hope to see you on a future webinar. Hope everybody has a great rest of day. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.